You're going to want to stay tuned to this episode of Remote Weekly Spotlight. If you're interested in transitioning into a remote career from a non-remote career, or if you're interested in the dynamics, the social dynamics of the hiring of global remote talent and how to do so in a socially responsible way. Now, Danny Page, who at the moment is the COO of UpCounsel, as well as the founder of The Village, a company that outsources global jobs to the Philippines in a socially responsible way. But he has not always done that. At one point, he was a sports personality, TV broadcaster, radio guy, making calls on the sidelines at USC, and he made a drastic career change into operations. He talks specifically about how he did that and then how to run an operationally sound company, how to hire globally, the different pillars of social responsible hiring, and a whole bunch more. You're going to love this episode with Danny Page. Stay tuned. Mr. Danny Page, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. Wow, I was young there. Excuse me for typing. I was actually just about to reshare this link. Boy, that was certainly a vision into a past life, wasn't it?
Right.
I think one of the funny things is, I cut that when I was in TV maybe 5 years ago. I edited that when I was in TV 5 years ago. And two of the figures that I'm talking to or talking about are like famous people now, right? Stanley Johnson, who was a high school student at Mater Dei, he's a rising star in the NBA. And then Ed Orgeron, who was an assistant at USC and just won the college football national championship with LSU. So it's kind of funny to see that those guys were, known in their circles, but 5 years later, it's amazing. And I know it's one of the things we'll talk about. It's amazing what can change in life in 5 years, right? And
change, my friend.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, tell me. So that's kind of where I wanted to start, because Danny, you are an interesting guy. You've got obviously a background in broadcasting, which today I don't think has much relevance to what you do as as COO. And maybe what we'll find out is there is more in common there. But tell me first about, when did you know you had a voice for broadcasting, and when did you go into that world?
Well, I mean, I think we grew up all loving, a lot of us grew up loving sports, right? Like, I know you're like a huge Celtics fan, and that means a lot of us grew up playing sports. My athletic career ended when I was 15. I broke my leg playing high school football. I never played in a game. I got hurt in practice. Wow. And it was very clear that was not what I was going to do. So they asked me during one of the games when I was injured, because the public address announcer didn't show up. They asked me to go up into the booth and do the tackle on the play by number 23, Trevor Peckham. And people were like, wait, that was a 15-year-old just doing that, announcing? I already had this really deep voice. So from there, Jordan, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. By 17, I did my first games on television. USC is, had and has an excellent broadcast journalism school. It's the only school I applied to. I grew up a USC brat too, around the LA area. And then going on to SC, our team when we were there, led by Pete Carroll, was incredible, right? We went 48-4. We won 3 Heisman trophies, 2 national championships, and I got to do all of those games. It was the most amazing experience to be a kid covering that classic USC football team. Yeah, that's
unreal, man.
It was awesome.
Daniel says go C's, which I love and appreciate. Thank you, Daniel.
That's
Daniel,
okay.
You from Boston? I got to actually, my whole family's from Wilmington and Billerica area. So that's why, and I got to live in Somerville for about a year of my life, but I've had this weird sense of living, mostly on the West Coast, and then having this East Coast team that I enjoy.
Right.
But it sounds like
I didn't realize the family connection. I didn't realize the family connection of you and the
Yeah.
Celtics. That explains. I thought you might have just been one of those guys that was like, I'm going to pick this team.
Yeah. Family can brainwash you. Along that course. So is it more a matter of just having that deep voice? Is that what it was?
That's what started it, and a deep love and passion for, a deep love and passion for storytelling, I think. And for me, that evolved into really a massive a massive focus on asking difficult questions. And really, one of my first mentors, I mean, I haven't talked to him in years because he's kind of a big deal now. Not that he wasn't a big deal then, is Pete Carroll, right? Was Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And, I was a young reporter, and Coach Carroll pulled me aside one time. I remember vividly that, we would all line up and do these, weekly interviews, all of the news outlets. And again, this is in the middle of the Heisman Trophy run for Reggie Bush, leading up to that Texas National Championship. If you're not a sports fan, you may or may not know what I'm talking about. But we would get to do weekly interviews. So it was like ESPN, ABC, and then the little student TV station would get there 2 minutes with Pete Carroll. And I remember Shelley Smith of ESPN, who's a famous reporter, is on one side of me. Jim Hill from CBS is on the other side of me. We would do these all the time. But I asked a question in the press conference to Coach Carroll about the horse collar tackle. You know what the horse collar tackle is, right? Like, it's a really nasty tackle that, sorry, I'm making this story longer than it needs to be, but it's a really nasty tackle that back then was legal, and a USC player nearly broke his leg on. I said, Coach, shouldn't they change this rule to ban horse collars? And he loved that question so much that when we went outside after the press conference for the one-on-ones, Shelley Smith, she's got a deadline. Coach Carroll says, hey, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh my God, what's he going to tell me I did wrong here? And Coach is like, that was a really good question. He said, do you know how challenging my job is to have to answer the same questions over and over from reporters every single day? And he went into this whole thing. He probably talked to me for 20 minutes. And Shelley Smith and ESPN are like, hey, we got a deadline here. And he's like, you know what? I don't care. I'm talking to this kid. And from there, he and I built this really unique relationship around him mentoring me into being a great reporter. And I think so many of the things I learned from Coach Carroll are part of what I do every day in business, right? And that is always asking tough questions, always maintaining that positivity that everything is going to work out great because you're going to make sure it does so. So my time with Coach Carroll was just absolutely massive in my life, and I've loved following his success over the years.
Or as I call him, Uncle Pete.
Uncle Pete, man, Uncle Pete. Oh,
and
boy.
Like, okay, so for everybody's context here, Danny, you lived in Barcelona for quite some time. How long was that?
Well, I go back and forth. So the last 5 years, basically working remotely. Like, I just love life in Europe. And I spend probably about half the time of the year in Spain and in Europe. I'll tell you what, Jordan, I'm back in California at my parents' house in my hometown. Something I've realized during the pandemic is that I'm easily, and I've always known this, I'm easily distracted. One of the reasons I love living in Europe, and you and I have been through this together in Split and Barcelona, is that ability, that quiet focus time where you don't have interruptions, where you don't have to solve problems for the people you're managing and leading. You just have to solve your own problems. And I am supposed to be back in Spain in 12 days. I can't wait to go back, mainly because I get to refocus the way that I really like to, the way that I really like to thrive in that regard. You know how that goes. I mean, I saw you preparing for Nomad Cruise with your focus time, I think in my dining room table for about a week.
Yep.
Right. And your deep focus is exactly what I strive for. And I struggle with here because, managing an organization and such, it can create challenges.
Yeah. And for additional context to how we met when
there's so much context.
There's so much context. When we met when I was on remote year in Croatia in April of 2018 is when we would have met.
Yeah.
And you were in the co-working space and running a company remotely.
Yep.
In operations. So I want to get to where you how you got to that point, but I think it makes sense to still kind of back up. And one of the reasons I made the comment about you living in Europe is because you still have the little espresso.
Yeah.
That's such a European thing. So I had to call you out on that. But
some things never change. And that's how I get into, no matter where I am around the world, that's how I get into my work zone, right? Because I have an espresso and sparkling water, homemade at this point, which is a positive thing. Espresso and sparkling water, and then it's kind of go time.
Yeah. And then we met in Croatia at that co-working space. I ended up staying with you in Barcelona.
Yep.
You had an extra room, which was awesome when I went there before the Nomad Cruise. So a lot of these links between the remote community, they show up again and again and again, which is something I want to get into. But first I want to just see how you made this transition into this remote world and into what you're doing now, because I work with a lot of people who, as I mentioned to you before, they're trying to make pretty drastic transitions from careers, right? They're traditionally educated in one field, trying to go to another field, trying to do it remotely, and it's like all this huge mix of complexity. Tell me about your
Absolutely.
transition.
So I didn't realize this at the time, right, Jordan? I didn't realize this at the time, because I hadn't read this book. But basically, what I was doing was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is the book I'm talking about. But basically, what I was doing to make this transition is I was looking at one of Stephen Covey's core theories is that progress and fulfillment is inside out, right? You create change. Tony Robbins says the same thing, right? Like you create change here, and that will affect your career, your relationships, your life. And I was instead of outside in, which is like, oh, I need this new job so that the job's going to change my life, right? And I know you're very much the same way, right? That it's what happens in here that affects everything out there. And basically that's what I started doing. I decided to make significant change. I had three core revenue streams in television. And I lost all three of those within 6 weeks at the beginning of 2014. It was crushing. And I just said, you know what? I can't be in and it was all because of budget cuts, basically, which happens in media. And I just said to myself, I can't do this to myself anymore. I cannot do this. And I said, I want to do something different. I want to go into a different field, but I need to understand what that is. I need to figure out me first. So that's the first thing is like, figure who the person is that you want to be and start building that person, and it will attract opportunity, I think. Another huge recommendation and another huge part for me was the positivity that Coach Carroll emphasized, right? Like you control these outcomes through your mentality. And that's probably number two. And then number three, which is external, which is tactical, startups are an amazing place to go. Right? Startups do not care if you've been in television, right? Startups just want the raw energy and talent and brain power, and you can learn absolutely everything. And that's what happened at my longest term role remotely as VP of Ops at Study Soup, and now the founder there is co-founder of a venture capital group I work for. With UpCounsel being, part of that venture capital group. And, his name's Sieva Kaczynski, brilliant guy, certainly a mentor. And he didn't say, oh yeah, well, this guy was in television. He said, no, here's somebody smart who wants to get after it. Let's go. So I think tactically, if you are thinking through a career change, startups are an amazing way to go and to learn and to grow.
So what did you do? How did you meet him?
AngelList. Now it's funny because he went to UCSB, and I mean, it's in the remote world and sort of in this like California bubble. Jordan, it's like 2 degrees of separation, right?
Yep.
So his closest family friends growing up are good friends of mine in Santa Barbara. And we didn't even know this. I didn't even check the like Facebook common connections. We didn't even know that. I just found him and found Study Soup as is. And Study Soup was just a life-changing opportunity, honestly. And it was for all of us. And the company's still in business. We took on $2 million of investment, and 7 years later, the company's still in business. It's been quite a ride for Study Soup.
So your initial role with them was what?
Head of operations. So we needed to scale this business from like 10 campuses to 500, and we did. It was challenging. We built one of the, probably one of the top on-campus marketing teams internally in the country, right? We built a team of students that would generate 30,000 leads in a month through direct marketing. And that was really what my role was. Companies like Amazon do a lot of on-campus marketing, but they hire external companies that do this, right? Well, we built that team internally, and it was hugely successful. It was quite a ride. I wasn't necessarily sure that when I was looking for this role that I wanted remote, but AngelList is just an amazing, or just using LinkedIn, like who are the startups? Who are these people? Say, hey, let's have a conversation,
Well, a lot of people don't find it that easy. So I guess trying to figure, like, what I like to do is really unpack, those little things that maybe you did unconsciously that other
Right.
people don't see as like the obvious thing. So when you think about that experience, like very tactically, you're on AngelList, you saw that company. What did you do?
I think that probably what I did was less tactical and more intrinsic, right?
Hmm.
Like I had the right attitude. I was willing to jump into anything, and I communicated that throughout the interview process.
Hmm.
Um, I think that tactically, I remember I was in this very room, what, 5, 6 years ago, and I got off the initial call and was like, God, I said some stupid stuff, and I probably did because I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well,
But
that's the key there, because I think most people will see like, okay, broadcaster to operations, like how does that happen? And there's a lot of people I talk to who are not getting interviews right now. Maybe a part of it's the time, like times have changed a little bit. People want more targeted people, but I think there's value in kind of seeing like, yeah, what were those intrinsic things? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, 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 please.
yeah, it's hard for some people to believe, and that's why I think it's important to dive into that.
Now I am just reposting this to LinkedIn while I had just a moment. Thank you. Um, I just think that there's something deeper about how you've defined who you are
Hmm.
and how you're approaching uh, this role. The job
Hmm.
is not going to change you. You're going to change you, and you're going to be able to get the type of job that you're
Hmm.
looking for, right? Inside out, not outside in. And frankly, I had spent 18 months working on the inside out. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that I was prepared in that way, right? I was super motivated. I had gotten super organized. I knew exactly what I wanted. And especially in startups, if you know exactly what you want, it will attract. And all I wanted to do was just dig in and work for a startup. That's all it was.
Hmm.
And they could feel that.
Why did you choose operations?
Um, I've been doing operations for a long time. I haven't always just been a broadcaster alone. My first company, and don't worry, it wasn't that successful. We didn't make a lot of money. It was very recognized in my home market in Ventura County and Santa Barbara County. But when I was 24, we started our own broadcasting network. We would buy, maybe like $100,000 worth of radio airtime a year and put high school and college sports on the radio. And one of the things we decided to do was have correspondence at every game on Friday nights. High school football is really big in this area. We'd have correspondence at every game on Friday night, and we obviously didn't pay them anything. But I had to organize that operation, right? Like 20
Hmm.
people calling in to my post game show, and we just had so much fun. But I think natively, that ability to like organize, as people know, I can be a little pushy sometimes too. So I guess that probably feeds into my like, feeds into my ego a little bit. I guess, yeah. Um, and I understand that about myself. I like telling people what to do. I hope I'm a person that also listens to people
Hmm.
telling me what to do. But I don't know. I'm giving you a lousy answer. It's just something I've been doing for a long time. And again, I went into a head of operations role, but in the end, we learned how to manage a product team, building a customer success team from scratch, which we did in the Philippines, setting up a complete acquisition machine. We learned everything in that company, everything.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction to hear, is that you'd had some of that operational experience prior, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm a 5-year-old, can you explain to me what your job is
No,
as a COO?
no. My sister's 34 and she doesn't get it. How do I explain? I'd say the easiest thing. Okay, this is a great question, Jordan. Pete Carroll would be really proud of this one, by the way. Um, so I would put it this way. I would say to a 5-year-old, I'm thinking more like a 10-year-old, than a 5-year-old.
This is exactly what happened last time. We were
Can I do
it was with
10-year-old?
Tara. It was with Tara too.
That's amazing.
And she
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
yeah, and then I was like, okay, let's make it a 10-year-old. So we're gonna make it a 10-year-old.
Really? That's what Tara said. Wow, great minds think alike.
Yeah.
So a 10-year-old, I would say a company makes this much money. Okay. A company spends this much money, and a company has this many people that it spends the money on and that helps it make the money. What is the ideal mix of making money, spending money, and people? And how do you make all that happen? Right? So the easiest thing to do when people ask me what I do is to show a P&L that says, hey, this is our top line, this is our bottom line, this is our profit, this is what goes into our bottom line, this is what goes into our top line, and that's what really makes the business work. I want to go back to the study soup experience, like in this culture of learning. I mean, learning from the study soup COO, Cody Elison, about how to build a P&L and finance and everything. I mean, you want to find a startup that's going to be your MBA, basically, right? I've never taken a business class in my life, never, and it was that experience that drove me to that.
I love that. I love that statement. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's about a culture of learning, which I mean, you do, right? The people you work with, it's like that's what they have to do if they're going to work with you. But that culture of learning is just impossible to beat.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about your study soup experience, which sounds like it was for you that culture of learning that kept you there, or that was a catalyst for you to make a lot of changes in your life. Now, more recently, you had mentioned that you'd become burnt out and you'd made some even more career changes recently. What is it you can tell us about those career changes for you?
Yeah. So I'll tell you exactly what happened. I hold 2 passports. I spend a good time of the year in Spain, in Europe. And I could tell that things were starting to get pretty bad at the beginning of March. I could see that it was not going to be a good situation there. The lockdown was going to be very strict, and just in a flash, the NBA game stops, all the sporting events are canceled, Trump closes the borders. I just threw my stuff in a suitcase that morning. I found a flight and I got out right before the US closed the borders. I still would have been able to get back in, but you would have had to go through the expedited screening and so on and so forth. I did a 2-week, quarantine alone in my sister's apartment here in Ventura, California. It's a little beach town north of LA. She moved into my parents' house, and I did a 2-week solo quarantine. And my first day I arrived, again, Sieva just is the central figure here. Sieva said to me, hey, can you meet with me? That was like on the weekend. He's like, yeah, I think I might have something for you to work on. And Sieva says, well, I said, sure. So I meet with him on Sunday. And he says, all right. So, and mind you, at the time, I already have 2 consulting clients. I have my, boutique outsourcing business. I'm working with Laurel Farrer and Distribute Consulting. And Sieva says, can you start working on something for me tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I'm going to be locked inside for 2 weeks, sure. Or why not? I'm going to be locked inside for a few months. He's like, well, it's only going to be 30 hours a week. And I'm like, dude, you need me to start 30 hours a week tomorrow? So basically what I did is I committed to, at least during the first couple months of the pandemic, Jordan, I was working unhealthy hours, 15 hours a day, because on top of everything else, we threw 30 hours on top. I was working 15 hours a day, probably working on the weekends, and I just lost it, and the reason why is I had allowed outside in to drive everything that I focused on. And I didn't realize I was burned out, but I was getting so stressed about work-related things that I didn't need to, because I wasn't focusing on myself. So what I did was, beginning in early May, I recognized this. I've started listening to my 5 all-time favorite books over again to like recapture the psyche and the mentality that put me in the place I was when those books impacted me so much. I've started doing a lot more visualization, which has been really healthy, going back through my principles every morning, and really getting in touch with who I am and who I want to be first is a priority, because I was allowing the external, taking on that much work is never healthy, but I was allowing the external to guide everything in terms of how I was feeling. The Enduring Ventures Group and Sieva and his co-founder Xavier Helgeson, who's just an amazing entrepreneur guy as well. They did come to me after about 2 months of this, and they said, "Hey, we want to make you full time. You'd have to cut off a lot of your other, a lot of the other things you do." And well, actually, they never said that. That's not true at all. But they said, "We want to make you full time and have you be CEO of this company." I was like, "Yeah, of course." So it's been a really awesome transition, and I love working with these guys.
That's awesome. I want to bring up one comment that we got, which was from Fahad here. He said he's very interested in specializing in operations so he can improve the competitive standing of the companies entering for.
Nice.
And one of the things I wanted to point to specifically about this comment and then about what you said was that there was this one guy who became kind of the central point of a lot of your growth development experiences. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this to me is a prime example of how networking and putting yourself around connectors and finding some of those central figures in your life who can be the people that really extend the branch can be so important.
Yeah, but there's a couple pieces to this. You're
Sure.
absolutely correct. But I've talked a lot over the last 10 minutes about Sieva, right? And what he did with Study Soup and what he did in mentoring so many people and continuing to. So you would think that like he and I were meeting every day and no. As a great leader and a great manager, he knows how to maximize the time spend and the impact that he's able. Did I just have like a power outage or something? He's able to maximize the time spend that he has with people, right? And I've learned so much from him and grown so much from him. But maybe in the first 6 months of Study Soup, the last 4 years, maybe a one-on-one every couple weeks, and then in the weekly review meeting or something like that. Like a great leader is someone who knows how to spend as little time as possible managing their people, right? And that was hugely, that was a huge part of this experience. One of the other things I'd say though, Jordan, is that at Study Soup, we had, not just the opportunity to grow ourselves, but we worked with some amazingly bright college students. And so the way Sieva mentored me, I made sure I mentored dozens of our students that would come through, whether they were note takers, whether they were on the marketing team, whether they were managers. I mean, we really felt that Study Soup served as the MBA for hundreds of university students that learned entrepreneurship and that learned management and that learned leadership. So the important thing is if someone's helping you out in that way, you pay it forward, and you don't have to like force yourself into that. It should just be innate. It should just be part of who you are.
Do you have any specific examples of students or people that you had mentored that really went above and beyond to show you some value, which, then again, you reciprocated through your mentorship?
Oh, there's too many to count. I mean, there are too many to count. A lot of our students they were, 20 years old, 21 years old, and we would have hired them full time over someone that was 30, right? Or someone that was 5 years experience. And it was because of that approach that I talked about earlier on, which was 1, I'll do anything, and 2, I want to learn, and 3, I'll be a positive person and a great communicator. And as we talk about the importance of broadcasting a little bit in remote work, I mean, you have to be an excellent communicator, and you have to speak your mind. And I think coaching people on developing that presence is crucial. You have to be able to stand out in a remote setting, to really be able to grow and to move your career up. And that's one thing people thinking about. I'm sort of trying to tie this back into the career change and to Fahad here as well is ensure you are a great communicator above all else. And that's one of the things remote work does is it forces us to be great communicators.
And I'd love to hear anyone in the chat who can comment on maybe one thing that they've done to stand out, to find a mentor, or one thing that they've seen from people who've looked for mentorship that's really shown them value, because I think that's so important. I had one of my assistants come to me, and she sent me an email basically complimenting me about what it is that I do, having a pretty extensive list of things that she had recognized about me that
Nice.
she wanted to learn from, and then making an offer to me to work with me for free.
That's
and
cool.
to learn underneath me of different things, because she wants to do something similar. And the way that it was written and the way that it was proposed was a no-brainer. And I think you can probably find parallels within some of those students that you've talked to, is that when you come with value, you've done your research, and you become proactive in whatever it is that you're providing.
Yep.
People can't say no to you. It's you just give them that option. It's like you give them no option, right? So I think that that's kind of important to call out in all this.
Totally. And another key mentor for me that people in the space will know is Laurel Farrer. I mean, she's just a phenomenal person and a great leader. And Laurel mentored me a lot over the last year and a half. And I would kind of say, like, I almost felt inadequate. Like, am I driving value? And she said, of course you are. You drive tons of value for me as well. And it's been the same with Sieva. And maybe it was even the same with Coach Carroll, right? Where, like, finally someone asked him an interesting question every day after practice, So
Yeah.
you have to drive value for your mentor, for the people that you look up to, and for the people that give you a chance.
Yeah. So you go into this role at UpCounsel. You're still running operations for the village. Tell me about what it takes to become a great operations leader.
Oh, wow. Another good question. And just to identify the village, I have a boutique outsourcing company. We build remote teams in the Philippines in a socially responsible way, reinvest in education in the local market. We have some awesome clients. The Hustle's a client, for example. And we like to work with a limited number of companies, just that we know are motivated and excited to hire global talent for the first time. Anyway, one of the biggest things I'm working on that really is important, this is actually the core thing that I'm working on myself that's really important in being great in operations, is prioritization. I mean, we bought this company. UpCounsel announced it was going under in February. Our principals in Enduring Ventures, Sieva and Xavier, had both used UpCounsel and said, wow, wait, what? We acquired the assets and we relaunched UpCounsel. As I said, the day after I had that conversation with Sieva in early March. So it was like March 15th. And prioritization is something that I've challenged myself on and that I've struggled with a little bit, because when you acquire a company with no full-time staff, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to learn, right? But here's what it is, and our CEO KJ Erickson and I talk about this. Here is what is at the core of being a great operations leader, is that you're able to understand the massive big picture, and you're able to understand the most minute detail, right? It's like evaluating a pebble versus evaluating this rock we live on in the earth, right? Like the tiniest detail, but the most important piece. And knowing exactly who should look after each of those pieces, and really balancing between the small details and the big picture. And that's the challenge. And again, prioritization is something I'm working on a lot right now, that especially when we acquired the company, well, everything was important, right? Payroll, healthcare. I mean, everything's important. Understanding the CS funnel, the CS flow, I should say, not the funnel. Understanding customer acquisition. So now I'm trying to sort through that and prioritize a bit better.
So how do you say that you got this big project now that you didn't expect to fall onto your plate? What's the first way that you go about prioritizing what to do?
Well, I mean, I think that just depends on the person's creative process, right? And the way that different people analyze different projects. For me, I create a scale that says, what are the important criteria? And then I score the different pieces of the project very quickly on that scale, and then look at the score and say, okay, this is the place to start. This is so on and so forth. I think we're trained very much in digital society to, and I'm guilty of this a lot, to complete the easier, quicker pieces first. And that's just not what we should be doing here. So, for me, it's taking that step back, looking at each of the specifics. What are the criteria that go into prioritization, and then scoring each of those individual criteria and coming up with a final score.
Then how do you battle that resistance? And then how do you enable your team to battle resistance? Because doing the most important thing isn't always, like you said, the thing that we naturally want to do.
What book is it with resistance and the lizard brain?
The art of war. The art of war.
War of art.
War of art. War on art.
Yeah.
On art.
There you go. Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. Especially because, and our team's growing really quickly. I mean, you gotta understand that day I came in and there were 2 of us that had to figure all this out. And by the end of the week, we had 10 basically, including just an amazing group of people I've worked with, for years now, at Study Soup, based in the Philippines, that came in and we worked together to really figure out that CS funnel. And now we're up to like 30, I would say, in about 2.5, 3 months. So I think it does come down to communication and workflows. You have to make sure that when you're tapping people on the shoulder in your business, you're doing it for a high priority, that you have all the details available. Like, there's nothing that annoys me more than when something is delegated in a Trello card or a Slack message and someone asks like, hey, where can I find that sheet? It's like, okay, come on. Like, we've done this before, and I'm guilty of that plenty as well.
Yeah.
So I think thorough communication, thorough delegation is one of the most important ways to ensure that operations move seamlessly. In terms of resistance related to completing low priority tasks, that's like an operator's battle, right? Because again, we focus on completing and oftentimes the easier, quicker pieces. So I don't have a great answer there, but I will tell you I'm always working on it.
I think one of the ways that's interesting that you do it, maybe, I mean, consciously and unconsciously, is living in Europe again, because you're waking up and you're 5-6 hours ahead of anybody, even on the East Coast, that would be able to distract you. And then right now, you're probably in the worst, I imagine, because being in Pacific time, no matter how early you wake up, you're late. The world has already started, and you're behind. So
it's not good.
It's I can see why you'd want to go back.
I get up at like 5 a.m. when I'm here, so that I get 3 hours in.
I bet.
What time zone are you guys on? Are you East Coast? Are you
I'm
Eastern time?
Central.
Central. So you get a couple hours,
which I like. I think that's kind of right in the zone for me.
Sweet spot.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
Post pandemic, I'm going to be paying a visit down there for sure.
Yeah,
I need that. I need that time zone change. But I also do not need European winters. I know I'm in Spain, but like winter is not. It's just not a part of my life. I'm done. Yeah, I did one winter. I'm over it.
Down here, Mexico's great year round.
Cool. I'm in.
So I wanted to talk about the pillars of social responsibility, because you.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Oh, is this too much?
No, I just get excited.
Yeah. So okay. So why is this subject so exciting to you? And then let's talk about the pillars.
I don't know why the subject is. No, I do know why the subject. I think it's important whenever possible for us to think about the small things we can do to make a large global impact. That if certain decisions we made were being done at scale, and being done by a lot of people, then the world could be a better, more balanced place. So what this ties into is Basically hiring global talent in a social responsible way. That's what we're talking about. But my real why here that underlies that is, I deeply believe that we are all, people around the world are, especially now, incredibly similar in a lot of ways. Again, especially those that live digitally. But we allow nations and cultures to make us feel like we're different. And I want to use work, remote work. I like to say work as it should be, work as you want it, to rewire the social dynamic worldwide and the social dynamic that underlies the global workforce. So that's one of the pillars, right? And that's at the core of this. And what I'm talking about is you get a group, a company working together of people from all over the US, people from all over the Philippines, and in companies I've worked with in the past, you'll have teams in Eastern Europe, you'll have teams in Spain. I mean, right now, even UpCounsel being a few months old, we're represented by 4 continents, I want to say, which is amazing. And you know what we learn when we work together from people around the world? We learn that we're all pretty similar in a lot of ways. And people have this view of outsourcing that it's like, okay, I'm going to hire a company, they're going to do everything for me. And all those companies are branded like conversion X, it's like something about, great NPS scores. And like, to me, that's not what building a team or building a company should be about at all. It should be about getting people together around a common goal that are all bought in and just going for it. Right. And that's how that's sort of the first layer of socially responsible outsourcing, right? Which is you don't have to hire conversion X anymore just to, build your team for you and have everyone work in an office and make sure that their breaks are 14 minutes and 59 seconds, so on and so forth, right? You can create an environment, using the term outsourcing, you can create an environment within a global team that's exactly like the team you have here, because Filipinos, they're not any different than us. In fact, they're nicer, more family-oriented people, right? Like, we're all the same. Let's do this together. And that changing social dynamic is a big part of it as well. To me, another thing we do is pay 20% above market value in terms of salaries. We, instead of just telling companies, we'll manage this for you, we like to teach them how to build their own teams as well. And then, this is through the village, obviously, and then handle payroll and HR and so on and so forth for these companies and say, hey, we'll hire what you need, but you're the best managers of this. You don't need to bring in some outside company. Now, there are some outsourcing, there are tons of outsourcing companies whose value is, for large corporations that say, hey, we need 500, we need a 500 person customer success team and don't want to deal with it. Well, that's great for you, but startups don't need that. Small and medium-sized businesses in the US don't need that. And Jordan, the companies we've worked with, you would not believe the dynamic we've seen, right? Because there are varying levels of expectations, but we have brought people in, again, in an environment where there's buy-in, where they're open to speak their mind. They're working from home, so they're able to spend more time with family. We care about where they're from. We reinvest in education where they're from. You should see the response for these US companies who came in with a lot of questions, and now it's like, wow, these are such amazing people. We love working with them. They're part of our team. They're part of our family. And that normally happens after 6 weeks. And that's been the exciting thing for me about what we do at the Village. And at the Village, we want to be the opposite of an outsourcer, right? We want to be thought of as a global talent hub that connects people and shows them how to work together.
Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to take out of that, which I thought were really interesting. One is drawing the connection between what you said earlier about the pebbles and the big rocks, right?
Right.
I think the reason you're so passionate about it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is because as an operator, as someone who has an operations mindset, as someone who is really passionate about creating those systems and creating this kind of larger ecosystem, but also being concerned about the small details, is the same connection to what you said about the ripple effect of the actions that you're taking every day with social responsible hiring, right? It's the same thing. It's like you're concerned about the small little details of how people within these organizations are communicating on a daily basis, as much
Right.
as you care about the big picture of the world and us being able to learn from each other and create social dynamics that bring us together, right?
Totally. Totally. And if we don't have a why, then what's the point? Like, and to me, outsourcing companies and the way those companies engage with, large corporations, like I don't see a huge why there,
Mm.
other than like making money basically. And that's just me as like a sort of, bleeding heart kind of guy. But I really believe that if companies, especially startups and small and medium-sized companies around the US, said, yeah, we're open to global teams. Let's give this a shot. Let's hire in the right way. Let's find great talent around the world that is more affordable than US talent. It will rewire the social dynamic. It'll help those companies to grow. It will support job creation in the US instead of just taking jobs away, right?
How does that? Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think especially in an early stage, I mean, what is it, Jordan? 70% of startups fail because they're paying overhead related to rent, right?
Mm.
So if you're able to build a remote global team, we would have seen, thousands, if not tens of thousands of startups grow into sustainable businesses if they had hired internationally and worked remotely. Right. So I think, especially at the formative stages, if you're very careful with your talent budget and you spend the right way, and you build your company the right way, well, that business is going to stay in business and is going to be able to support more and more domestic jobs.
Mm. Interesting. So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, and this is a question that would come to my mind is like, why wouldn't they just continue hiring where they've already been hiring if they have a pool in like the Philippines, for instance?
Well, different people from different countries and different types of training do offer different skills, right? There's no question about that. You or I, or probably a list of 50 people that you'd have on the show, could spend a week doing customer service calls versus someone from one of our teams spending a week doing customer service calls. We are native English speakers. We are talking to Americans. Let's say this is a US company targeting Americans, so on and so forth. We are from their country. I bet you that those Philippines team customer support, customer support team members, those Philippines-based customer support team members would have better scores and metrics than we would after a week. And we've run these tests before with domestic salaries and domestic talent, and those tests have showed that the Filipinos specifically had better scores. And that might seem hard to believe. It's not at all, because this type of support, this type of communication is just something that's done very, very well in a cultural sense, right?
Yeah.
Why are Ukrainian developers so strong, right? And there is a cultural, and again, what makes socially responsible different is you don't just tell the Filipinos, all right, here's your job, do customer support. I don't want to hear anything from you, because that's what outsourcing does. You tell the Eastern Europeans, like, okay, build stuff, that's it. That's not how we're going to do this here, right? We are going to be part of a team together. We are going to be part of a family together. We want to know what you think about this business. And that's how you really precipitate the level of success that I've seen before.
Okay, so you mentioned Ukraine as well. Like, what are some other places that you view as talent-rich, kind of global areas?
Yeah, so I mean, there's just so many examples, and it comes down to the commitment of the individual to that part of the world, right? The commitment of the person doing the hiring to that part of the world. Did you meet? I'm not sure if you met Daniel Juarez. He's a good friend in Barcelona. He's the CEO of a tech recruiting company based in Latin America called Interfell. Interfell can find you great engineering talent in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be able to do that, right? Like the Village partners with Interfell to find talent in Latin America. but I think you really need like a commitment to that area. I'm actually going to be spending more time in Croatia, in Split specifically, in the years to come, and I'm interested in opening Croatia as an outsourcing market as well. But, and I have a potential partner there, but I have to spend time there. I have to understand the talent. I have to understand what they want. I have to get access to the right talent. So there's great talent everywhere worldwide. I think there's amazing talent in Spain, by the way, as well. You just have to be committed to that in a cultural sense, to really understand that, is how I'd put it.
And how do you make that decision of where to commit?
You just do it. No, it's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I think especially if you're thinking about global hiring for your company, just go to a place. Sieva, this all started, the village all started with Sieva again, right? Because he went down to the Philippines and we built a 35-person phone team. He was there for 2 to 3 months. We built a 35-person phone team, and then after like 4 months, we're like, wait, we're all remote. Why are they in an office? And we sent everybody home immediately and said, yeah, everybody's going to work from home. So you have to go to that place, and you have to commit to that place being a part of your life, and being a part of your company's life. And really, and the Philippines is a part of my life now. There's no question about it. It's a huge part of my life now. Just like, if I start providing talent in Croatia, if the village starts providing talent in Croatia, it'll be because Croatia is a big part of my life, not just because I see it as a good market.
Okay, cool.
Same thing for Mexico, right? Same thing for Mexico where you are.
What's a small thing that someone in operations can do that disproportionately improves something within their team dynamic, social dynamics?
Okay, easy. This is super easy. And it is, accepting responsibility for your mistakes, okay? If you are in a leadership position and you have new team members, or like we do, you've acquired a new company, the biggest thing you can do is go in front of your team, more so the team that you manage, not your managers, but go to the team that you manage and say, and this is what I'll do. I'll create like 2 or 3 slides if I really screw something up, because we all do. I will create 2 or 3 slides, and I will say, here's what I did wrong on slide 1. Here are the numbers that impacted, and here's what I'm doing to resolve this. And people within your team that you do that for, like, oh my gosh, like if he's doing this, why am I not doing this? You want to create a culture of responsibility. That is the biggest thing you can do. Accept responsibility for your mistakes. Show everyone remotely, hey, I this is my bad. I did this. And it'll drive a huge cultural change.
I love that, because I think it really speaks to leading by example, whereas a lot of times people think whatever they say goes, right? But it's how you act.
Totally.
It's just like kids with their parents, like however you act within an organization, the people that work with you, the people that work for you will act the same way. They will meet you where you're at more often than not with that level of responsibility. So I think that's great. Cool. What's the most valuable thing that you've learned from the Filipino culture that you've been so close to?
I mean, they teach me things every day. I learn from them every day. And I had a goal this year, and again, we're not a huge operation, right? I had a goal this year to have 100 people hired in remote jobs. And we're at like, across 7 companies, I want to say we're at like 30 right now, about 35. We're talking about, one of the big problems in the Philippines is the commute. We hired over, she works at UpCounsel now. We hired over an extremely talented manager from Wayfair, who had been in the founding team at Wayfair. They have a 7,000 person customer support team. She was in the founding team of their customer support mechanism. And she left to come over and work through the Village for a SMB here in the US. She has 5 kids. She loves her family. Obviously, 5 children. I don't know how she does it. I don't know how her and her husband do it. Her name's Rachel. But she was commuting, Jordan, 2 hours each way. She would get on the bus. She would, and this is the common theme in the Philippines. And that's why home-based jobs, as they call it there, are so important. Remote jobs are so important because we can never understand culturally how important family is there versus here. Family is everything, and family is important in the US. Family is important with the West, but every time I look at their commitment to family, literally nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. And I think that's why with the Village, when we hire for companies, our retention rate is like at least 5 times the industry standard. It's absurd, because people feel that we're a family, right? And at UpCounsel, of our Philippines team members, 70% are people that I've worked with for at least 4 years, right? Because we've constructed that sort of family feeling and that family culture. It's not about the job. It's not about the money. It's about how do they get to spend the most time with that family, and how do they have a family in the workplace as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can kind of recreate the value system within the organization, right? Of that culture, and offer that as a huge benefit, plus paying more than market rate, plus reinvesting, plus treating them like a team, right? Like having those conversations of accepting responsibility, and whereas I think a lot of, like you said, outsourcers might blame the people that they're outsourcing the work to for any mistakes that might be made. Cool, man. I really enjoyed this chat. I think
thank you.
It's illuminated a lot of things. Hopefully I asked you some good questions, which I know is your
Uncle Pete would be proud.
Everything. Yeah, my Uncle Pete would be very proud. I wanna see if you'd leave us with a statement in your broadcasting voice. If you'd kind of take us out.
No.
You can't take us out. Like this was Remote Weekly Spotlight with Danny
okay. Yeah, that's it. People ask me to party to like do a game call or something. I'm like, there's no game on. What am I supposed to say?
Yeah. I'll feed it to you.
So you've got to say the out, right? You've got to talk your way out, and then I'll do the like, come on down. You're the first contestant on The Price is Right.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody so much for watching. Myself and Danny Page, the Remote Job Coach, Remote Weekly Spotlight. Think about how you are socially impacting the world, how you're building teams, how you are creating a family within work, and we will see you next time.
This has been the Remote Weekly Spotlight with Jordan Carroll, the Remote Job Coach. For more information, go to theremotejobcoach.com. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Hulu, No, I lost it there, but we did it a little bit. Thanks, Jordan. I really appreciate it.
I don't have a TikTok.
I know you. That's why I said it. You're not on Hulu either, but that's why I put it out there. Thanks for everything, man. Always.
Thanks, everybody. And Danny, thank you.
Me too.